An entire world is ready for you to start your career teaching the path to wellness.
Mastering the science of mindfulness.
And the art of coaching.
To help clients achieve mental, emotional, and physical betterment of life.
Through movement,
nutrition,
recovery, and regeneration.
Because impacting one person impacts a family.
Impacting a family impacts a community.
And impacting a community impacts the world.
Become an NASM certified wellness coach.
Well, hello there, listener, and welcome to another episode of the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall, and back at the start of my fitness career, before I would even say I had anything to do with wellness, I got my very first job working as a personal trainer in this like fancy, sexy luxury gym. This big chain, I'm not going to say the name, but I was working at one of the flagship locations in Manhattan's West Village, like really cool neighborhood, really high-end clientele, had a couple celebrity clients, like thought we were doing it right. There was a time in that gym, and I got to applaud my management team from that moment because my managers handled this story really well, the story that this all is based on. They started this like trainer Olympics contest in the gym to get everybody like what I thought was cross training and working out together and to get us all like playing together, which was a really cool experience to be in. But a few years later, I found out what the why was underneath the what. And working at this like fancy gym chain, every year our senior leadership would tour the clubs. And so management would run around, they'd clean everything up. They try to make everything appear perfect so that when senior leadership came through, they got kind of the veneered version of our day-to-day experience. And apparently, after senior leadership toured our gym, they sat down with our club leadership and essentially told them that our female trainers don't look like trainers. So for context, on that training team, there were all kinds of just like everyday athletes who just really loved fitness. There were people like me, former collegiate athletes. We had a former Olympian. We had a future Olympian, someone who went on to be in the Olympics. We had a nationally ranked water polo player. So you get the idea. We had some really incredible women. And then we just had some women who really loved movement and decided to make it their career and everything in between. But apparently at that time, our visual perception was that we didn't look like we belonged on the covers of magazines. And senior leadership felt that club leadership had to do something about it. And hearing that later, a few years into my career, I'd always been kind of self-conscious that I had a narrative in my mind, oh, I don't look like a trainer. And here it was, someone in leadership giving confirmation to essentially my worst fears about myself and my perception and my friends, who all were making incredible positive impact in the lives of their clients. And today's guest makes incredible positive impact, not only in the lives of her clients, but as an exemplar of somebody who's gone against the grain herself. And I actually can't wait to bring her on to hear her response to that narrative, because I think she might have some things to say about it. So my guest today is Morit Summers, and she's been a personal trainer long before I was, since back in 2007. She's got a bachelor's degree in exercise science and kinesiology. She is the co-founder and owner of Form Fitness in Brooklyn, where she makes her mark on the world, on her clients and on her staff. I'm so excited to have her here to talk about her journey and her impact. Morit, welcome to Better Than Fine.
Hello, thank you. I am like in a nervous giggle based on the story you just told.
Yeah, I thought you might have. So I'm going to caveat this. We are not going to say the name of that employer.
No,
Morit actually worked different location, same company. Would you give any thoughts, or do you just want to share your journey with us and vibe on it?
I mean, like, it's so sad, but I'm not surprised about that story. But I'm also like, wow, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Obviously I've lived very similar storylines within that particular business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want you to share that story with us. So for the podcast listeners, I say all the time, I'm a big woman. I'm 6 foot tall. I played collegiate rugby. Like, I am not a small person, and I don't look like I belong on the cover of a fitness magazine. You are more than welcome or not welcome. Like, I just want to give context to an audio listener. I'm never going to be on the cover of anything.
Well, I disagree.
Like,
see, we can strive. No.
Yeah.
See, we can strive to be on the cover.
Tell me what you got. Share that journey with us. Share your perspective with us. I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, to give context, I am 5'6" and like probably currently weigh 250. I have no idea. But like when I was working, that was a long time ago. So when I was working at the age of like 21, I weighed a lot less, but I was still probably in the 200 range, and again, bigger than every other female that I worked with. So, I mean, I can kind of go back and just give my background story real quick, but I was 14 years old. I was overweight. I didn't fit in with my peers, and I like also had a really hard time in like all things fitness. So I asked my parents if I could join my local gym because I wanted to lose weight. I wanted to fit in. And so luckily they were able to afford a personal trainer. And that's like kind of when I just fell in love with fitness overall. But I think what it was for me, and this is like looking back now, I didn't have to be around my peers to go through my journey, right? I didn't have to compare myself to the other 13 and 14-year-olds, even though there were adults in the gym and I'm sure they were like, who is this kid? It didn't matter. That wasn't in my mind. I got to just like do my thing. And so I really fell in love with like movement and getting stronger. And unfortunately at the time, like losing weight and fitting in. And then college, start of a career, many years of my career were still training people to lose weight, me wanting to lose weight, me fitting in with my peers again. And it wasn't until I like found fitness kind of all over again in a different realm. For me, it happened to be CrossFit / powerlifting, where I was able to like embrace my body for the things my body was capable of. And so now we're years and years later, and I've made a huge turnaround. And I get to coach people and help people like find their strength within, again, physically, mentally, but within using literal strength to get there.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's talk about that turnaround in the path, because I think there's some things that you do at Form Fitness that I want to highlight at the start of the conversation that I think are so invaluable for people to just know that it's an option. Like, so last week we had Katie Hake on the show and we were talking, she's a dietitian and nutritionist, and we were talking about, nutrition, non-diet dietitians, right? Like what is that's even an option.
What does that mean? Right. Yeah.
Because when you were getting your education, when she was getting hers, when I was getting mine, nobody was talking about that as even an option and what that looks like. And so I think it's a good launching point in this conversation to talk about like, what would a truly weight neutral fitness even look like from a starting point?
Absolutely.
That exists. So can you talk about how Form approaches that?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that, by the way. Like, you're right. Do people even know that exists? It's funny. I don't think I've ever like thought about it like that. You know what I mean?
Well, I didn't. Nobody. The whole point of it was always, right, aesthetics is all we talk about. And now we know in the industry, for the first time, people are working out for mental health is more important than aesthetics. Yeah,
right. So for us, number one, we don't even own a scale. It doesn't exist in the gym. It's just a non-existent thing. Now,
drop.
Right? We don't have it. We only have a couple of mirrors because, selfies, but like,
well, and to see your form, right?
Well,
like form
we could talk more about that at a different time, but yeah, like, that's not our focus. But what we have is people that come in and can give us all the lists and lists and lists of reasons as to why someone wants to start a fitness journey. And for some, it's still going to be weight loss, right? Because again, it's what we're told. This is what we need to want. And so what we do is we have conversation and we bring up well, what's the real why? Or we talk about what these things mean, and we go through the idea of like finding your strength, feeling better, right? Like, how do you feel currently? And so we want people to feel their best and live their best life. And that does not have anything to do with what they look like, nor does it have to do with the scale. It doesn't mean that we turn anyone away if weight loss is still a goal, because there are still reasons and times and places that weight matters, but it's how you approach those conversations.
Yeah, dig it. For the listener, you're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. My guest today has been featured in Shape, Health, and Fabulous magazine, and has even been on Good Day New York. It's Morit Summers, and we are talking about weight neutral fitness. And I think, to your point, any of us out here in the space talking about having a different lens, we're not out here throwing stones at anything you want for yourself. Like, that's not the point. The point isn't don't want whatever it is you want. I think the point, at least for me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is what is your actual aligned like desires? And I think what you just alluded to is like, how do you want to feel? Because a feeling isn't a number on a scale. A feeling is an emotional experience and a connection with yourself that's authentic and real and lived in your life.
Absolutely. Well, and health, right? So, you know, I'll give a little bit about my current life. Pandemic hit. I gained a ton of weight. I own a small business. I wasn't moving as much, and I was eating cookies, right? So I gained a ton of weight. And so, yeah, my weight became an issue based on my actual health, right? I went and I got blood work and I had all this stuff and it was not good. And so I went on a journey over the last couple of years, because now it's been a couple of years, to feel better, like actually, right? That again, I never once stepped back on the scale. Since that time, I have no idea what I weigh. And to me, it doesn't matter because I feel so much better. I moved more. I just started like paying attention to my food a little bit more, but I never was like, I'm gonna do what I've done in the past, which is go on a million diets, cut out all these things, and become another version of extreme, right? So even though I maybe haven't even lost more than a couple of pounds, it doesn't matter because I am stronger than I was. I'm moving better than I was, and my numbers are all back to normal, right? So weight doesn't have to equate to any of that stuff.
Yeah, thank you for sharing with such vulnerability, and I'm sorry to hear that you were unwell then. And I think you highlight something really important, which is, you know, very often if I'm working with a client who, you know, their physician is concerned about their weight, I'll always ask, like, well, what else?
Right.
Because if you're just telling me it's scale pounds, then let's put some muscle on you and see what happens. But almost always, if the physician is concerned, my client can tell me, you know, their A1C, their blood pressure, their, you know, lipid profile, their cholesterol, like something else that is more meaningful from a health perspective than their relationship to gravity on this planet, which is what a scale measures, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
I dig it.
Exactly.
So do you think, like, from your perspective, is there a harm being done by a weight focused lens in the fitness and wellness space? Like, what's the big deal?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because weight is aesthetic, right? Everyone wants to look, you know, you mentioned the fitness model on the cover of a magazine. And I will still say, and I'll say it to this day, one day I'm going to be on the cover of a magazine.
Yeah,
right?
girl.
And I don't even like, that's not actually my goal, but the point is to be able to be like, well, there are different bodies. There are different bodies. Let me like, period, the end of the sentence, right? Like there are different bodies. And so when weight becomes, we get put into the brackets of, well, you should weigh this, it becomes an aesthetic.
Yeah.
And that's not the point. Can you lift your kid? Like you said, is your A1C okay? You know, what are the actual reasons that fitness is a thing, or why should we all be moving, right? Movement is life. Life is not a six pack. You know what I mean?
Oh, you're singing my song, right?
Yeah.
And that And that weight, the number on the scale, weight doesn't actually tell me about my relationship to my sense of self, my
Right.
purpose, my how comfortable I am in my own skin, in how affectionate my husband is to
Right.
me, right? Like none of that's a number. All of that's
Right.
an experience.
Exactly.
Um, and I think, to your point, when we're glorifying particular body types, we're creating a perception that we're all supposed to be that way.
Hmm.
And as a fitness professional, as a wellness professional, I know I get really self-conscious about the projection of the industry
Hmm.
versus my lived experience when I know I help people
Hmm.
and I show up. Like, do you
Right.
want to speak to your own experience of any of that?
Yeah, I mean, we could, I could give my worst story from back then, which was like
You
I
can if
got
you
hired.
want.
Well, because it matters, right? I got hired because I was smart enough, and then I was called fat multiple times by management.
Mm.
You need to lose weight. You're not going to be able to pick up clients. You're not going to be able to help anybody. And then I
What?
became the top person because I can help people because what I look like has nothing to do with what I know. And nor does it mean that I'm not stronger than most of the people in the space, right? And so again, like your original question is, well, why does this perception? Why does it matter when the only thing we're looking at over and over again is the same body? Is because that's actually not what's walking down the street when you see your neighbors. And so if we're just continuously made to feel bad about ourselves, how can anyone actually get better? Because the mental part of all of it is how we're going to be physically healthier, right? We're going to continuously have these I'm sorry, I'm stumbling on my words, but just like self-conscious feelings. And if I'm constantly feeling bad about my physical being, like what I look like, how can I mentally be okay? And vice versa.
Yeah, you are welcome to stumble on your words because I literally have been sitting here with my mouth open, stuck on the idea that your management. Well, can we talk about the word fat for a second?
Yeah, of
I
course.
have I got a story. So over the weekend, I was at a positive psychology conference with like
Mhm.
a bunch of big deals.
Mhm.
And I was riding home on the train with this woman who is really like her domain is ageism, specifically around women. And
Mhm.
she had just given this incredible talk about you are the age that you are. And, it's not that you feel younger or that you appear younger. You just are the age that you are, and that it's ageist to try to glorify looking younger or feeling younger or
Mhm.
whatever. You just are how you are. And so she just gave this great talk. Everyone's so inspired by her. And I say something about being fat.
Mhm.
And she immediately, you know what she said. Do you know what she said?
No.
You're
Well,
not fat.
oh,
Oh, you're not fat. I was like, pick an objective measure that people
right.
throw that label on at the doctor. And whether you're talking
Mhm.
about BMI or body composition or whatever, I fit in that category. It's an
Mhm.
objective truth by the labeling system we've created in our society.
Right.
And it made her uncomfortable to perceive what she thinks of a fat person versus what I experience. But I had almost the opposite experience of what you're describing, where my management team was so uncomfortable with the idea of having a fat trainer be successful that
Mhm.
they would tell me that I had my calipers done wrong because there's no way
Right.
my body fat was as high as I said it was. And I
Right.
was like, do it again, pinch me up.
Right.
Like, let's
Right.
go.
Right. Yeah, I think it's funny. I'm just thinking about all the conversations that I have regularly with my clients, and it is funny because people judge people, and I
Yep.
obviously it sucks, and that just kind of is what it is. And like, that concept of what is fat. And so we talked about, yep, there's like the numbers that the doctors put on you, and then there's like, okay, well, what's actual, like what do people um really look at when they're looking at people? And so there's the visual. And so um I have no problem saying that I'm a plus size, or I have fat on my body, or I am fat, as long as it's not in the context of like degrading myself,
Yeah.
right? If it is just kind of like a factual statement. And the only reason that I even put any of those titles or descriptors when I'm talking is so that people do know that they're not alone, and that there are others that are like trying you know, to be in spaces and be there. Otherwise, like I'm Morit. I'm
Yeah.
not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
So
Yeah, I deeply know what you mean, right? It's about visibility and accessibility and who's invited into
right,
the world of caring for themselves.
right.
You're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. My guest is Morit Summers, and we are talking about weight neutrality and fitness. And you're right, right? Being the person who steps into the space and claims the label is an invitation to anybody else who doesn't look like there should be in the ad on the front of the gym. And you know what
Right.
I'm talking about, Marie.
Right.
The person who doesn't live in that body and even the aspiration doesn't have that aspiration toward that body,
Mm-hmm.
or doesn't want to believe it's possible, doesn't want to do that kind of damage to themselves, is being given the message that it's not for them.
Right.
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 Somebody sent me a quote from another fitness brand earlier today that was like a statistics about 70% of Americans live in a larger body is the language that they used. And that those with larger bodies have different physical and emotional needs toward fitness than those who are in like what we think of as a fitness body. And it was sent to me by another trainer. And they essentially were saying, like, they wanted my reaction because they wanted me to just agree with it so they could argue with me. But their reaction is like, well, that's disempowering to a larger bodied person because you're saying they're different than a small body. Yeah, I want to hear your reactions.
Well, I want to know what like their needs, like what, you know what I mean? Like what did they even mean by their needs are different?
That
would be my first. Yeah, that would be my like first question.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you what my reaction was that psychologically, I think the support that I give to a client that's in a larger body that doesn't think that it's for them, those tools of like agency and empowerment and efficacy are very different. Like it's a very different pep talk and like support structure and self-examination is what I think they're alluding to.
Right. But the physical, like, no, that part I understood and I would agree with that. It only, first of all, based on the person, not every big, larger bodied person isn't confident. Yeah. Like, let's start there. Now, many aren't because we're told not to be.
Yep.
Right. But not everybody is not confident. So like, that's a weird thing, but I maybe I misunderstood part of the post, but I thought it was saying something about they need physically different.
Yeah, I think for that one, again, I can go off of my interpretation.
Yeah, I'd love to just hear what your thought is.
I teach yoga in all sizes,
right.
And the system of yoga was designed to serve young Indian men 4,000 years ago, and that's a very particular body shape and flexibility, right? So when I've taught yoga for women in much larger bodies, I have to teach it differently because those bodies move differently and adapt differently and feel different than a teenage Indian boy, right? So like from a movement perspective, the expectation and the alignment and the respect are different than if you've got somebody in a smaller body. I don't even know how do I label that. Like I'm not.
Yeah, no. I understand what you're saying. I think I like misunderstood what post was.
Sure.
I don't listen. As a personal trainer, I work with bodies of all shapes, sizes, ages, all the things, right? And every body needs something a little bit different. So there's that. Right. I think that when we're teaching in a group fitness setting, so yoga, for example, the issue is that you're teaching to a big group. And so can you give a modification or a variation or a little quick tip here and there to help someone who maybe needs an adjustment? That's amazing. We shouldn't just assume that everyone is capable of a perfect, I'm just going to say downward dog because I can't think of another movement, right?
It's all good.
Right. So I think that there should be adjustments available. What I will tell you, as I am coaching more and more trainers to come up and working to mentor these trainers to work with all body shape sizes and whatnot, a lot of trainers who have never lived in a othered body won't think of certain things, right? Won't think of, for example, a conventional deadlift for someone that has a bigger belly can be really hard based on the idea of breathing and space.
Yeah.
So maybe a sumo deadlift is the way to teach hinging and movement and build strength, just so that people can breathe and feel comfortable in their movement to start. I'm not saying that they can't conventional, because they can, but it may not be the comfortable way to teach a movement. That's just an example, right?
Oh, I think it's a perfect example.
Right. And
please
so
continue.
again, like, no, just that there should be considerations for all things, but that could also be for injuries. That could be for age. That could be for, so I feel like putting it in a category of just larger bodies is like kind of a weird statement.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I think it's a perfect example of exactly the point I was trying to make, and you carried it home, is that if you're not thinking about, if you haven't lived in like you said, I love that you called it another body. Like if you haven't lived that way, you don't know. Right.
Right.
And, when I think about my own training education and the way that I was taught to work with, say, special populations post-surgical, or older populations as a specialized age group, right? Like we get a special education in how to program for and work with pregnant women,
Right.
because there are special considerations.
Exactly.
So to me, making it a particular
An
group,
adjustment,
you're like,
yeah.
think about what you're doing makes
Yeah.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to me that you're like, why make it a special group? But is it really all that different from, say, working with people who are over 75?
No, it's just considering the person you're working with.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
that, that leads to like part of what we also really, really lead home. And I don't know, you can like circle back to this if you want, but is when someone walks into Form Fitness or into our gym, or like what I would love for trainers to be really paying attention to, is that we never want to place goals on anybody, right? That the goal is not just about what the trainer has wanted in their past or what they currently want. It's about what the person wants. And so if you are considering this person that's sitting in front of you, if you're really listening to what they're saying, you should be able to adapt to them. And if you're not the right person for them, that's a totally other conversation.
Yeah. Oh, amen. You're singing the song. And I know it's something that in NASM's got a certified wellness coach course, and in CWC, there's definitely guidance around not projecting oneself into the client's journey, that you're there to make a space and be aware of your own biases so that you don't skew that lens.
Right.
But to your point, we don't get that education as trainers. That's not in the conversation for fitness. And I think it's really important to recognize that what you're doing there, when you do project yourself into someone else's goals or journeys or their ideas of what they want for themselves, is eroding their self-efficacy, right? You're saying like, I know better than you do about you, even though you've only known them for 15 minutes by the goal setting conversation.
Exactly.
Which is nonsense.
Right.
Nonsense.
Right. And I always believe that there's a time and a place to have conversation, make suggestions, again, have that conversation. So like I believe, and you'll probably agree with me in some way, that almost everybody in the world should lift some version of weights, right?
Yeah, pick some things up and then put them back down.
And we know, and we could list all the benefits. Okay. So I want to be able to have those conversations to promote the idea of lifting a little bit heavier, X, Y, and Z, right? But if someone hates that, like truly hates that, I'm not going to sit there and force it. That's not my job.
Yeah.
Right. It is not my job to change your mind. I can give you the reasons. I can explain why. We can try, see if you'll enjoy, but I'm not ever there to say, well, you have to. That's not my job.
Yeah. And I think that there's so many layers here, right? Like you as a skilled fitness professional should be able to work around that, right? Like there's a lot of ways that I can get someone stronger with them never touching a dumbbell or never touching a kettlebell. And I also think that from a psychological perspective, like if somebody's working out for wellness and well-being, there's a greater benefit to just movement that they like than there is to me going, well, this is the perfect program to get you the physiological adaptation of happiness. Because you don't actually know.
Absolutely. I talk about that from a bit of a different standpoint with the, again, like incoming trainers, the people that we're mentoring. So, I get a lot of times like, well, their legs like weren't exactly in the right spot. And I'm like, okay, I hear you. Let me ask you a question. Was it dangerous? Right? Was it dangerous? If not, is that person's goal to lift thousands of pounds or hundreds of pounds over their head? Right? If not, and it's just to have like a, mostly efficient, safe, just moving through your fitness, moving through your workout. Are you good? Then we're good, right? Like there's always a time and a place to be really specific and like really detailed and making sure that this needs to be exactly. And then there's always a time and a place where it's like, let's just do this thing, right? Let's sweat, let's move, let's feel, let's get a little stronger, but maybe again, not like thousands of pounds stronger. You know what I mean? Like there's different levels to how all of this works for people.
Yeah. And what it is that people want.
Yeah.
And I think what I want is to tell the listener that I hope you've enjoyed the pitter patter of little feet somewhere in Brooklyn. It's all good. Don't be sorry. I'm just calling it out for the listeners so they don't think that like, what is that noise? I don't want them to think
I have neighbors.
Hey, it's all good. I lived in Brooklyn for 12 years. I know what it's like. Actually, if you go back and listen to some of the early episodes of this show, I'm sure you hear my neighbors and many of them. But listener, you're listening to the Better Than Fine podcast. I'm your host, Darlene Marshall. And my guest is Morit Summers. We're talking about weight neutral fitness. And Morit, if whether it's a practitioner listening or it's a person who's feeling inspired, one of the things that I try to do with this show is inspire different kinds of thinking around building lasting wellness and well-being into one's life. And so my hope always when I have a guest is that you say something that sparks something in the listener. And so if somebody's feeling like, oh man, I'd never really thought about what this even looks like if I don't do it because of how I look.
Right.
How might that person pick up that ball and run with it? Like, what does it actually look like in practice for someone?
Yeah, listen, I think we talked about finding joy is like probably number one, but how do you even find joy in something that you haven't tried yet, right? So I know this is so simple, but you really do have to just start. You really do have to try something. And so taking that first step, the best advice or the piece of advice that I give people all the time that are like, I'm really honestly afraid of the gym. I don't know what to do there. I don't even know how to like start is get to the treadmill, get to an elliptical and just get on, right? Do 5 minutes and scan your area, feel your space. That's all you have to do. And then you can leave, right? Or maybe you just go to the locker room the first day, right? But no one else is looking. And I know that sounds so crazy, right? Because we believe everybody else notices everything, but they don't. They really have no idea. They don't care. They're there for themselves. The gym is one of the most narcissistic places you could probably ever walk into, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're there for themselves. So the best and the biggest piece of advice I can give is always just to start, even if it's wrong, even if it doesn't go, even if you last for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. You have to start because you have to try. And the only way we can start to grow and get better and stronger at anything is by that practice of trying.
I love it. I love it because so even what you said, like, even if it's wrong according to who?
Well, right.
Like one of the most infuriating things for me out on the internet is when any fitness professional is like, do it like this. This is how you do the thing. And I'm like, you don't know what's going on in anybody's life. Nonetheless, half of your followers and how they might react to that experience. So, wrong according to who, just like let yourself go. I love that starting point. And then you also mentioned like, in order to this, I think this is actually like universal advice. And I'm going to start pushing this in the positive psychology world, that like, we talk so much about joy in my space. And it's like, in order to find joy, you have to go out there and start trying things.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great synopsis of like a whole set of things that people need to know, but specifically around movement and fitness and wellness. It's like, if you want to find it, you got to go look for it and you got to start somewhere.
Exactly.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. I, you know, again, as a plus size woman in the gym, I want to be clear. I am well aware that I'm at more of an advanced level of fitness than someone that is a beginner. But people notice me because I am like there and happy and doing this thing that I love. It has nothing to do with the actual fitness, right? They're like, right, we the vibes that we give are the thing that people are noticing. So go in, do your thing, stay, you know,
Yeah.
you know, you'll smile when you want to smile. There might be somebody there that's like in the exact same boat as you. Um, do it at home. We'll go for a walk. It honestly doesn't matter, right? As long as we start.
You know, you said a second ago, like, oh yeah, but this is, me at an advanced level of fitness, but you
Mhm.
got there because you started as a beginner.
Yep, I've started back then. I've restarted, you know, many times.
Yeah.
I
But I
just
think,
joined a new gym, and like, you know, as a fitness person, I feel like you'll appreciate this, but I joined a new gym and I was like, "Ooh, all the toys," and I get to like restart again, right? But I'm walking around knowing I know where nothing is. I don't know any of the people in the space. So I'm even like, okay, well, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to like gaze over here, play a little bit. Okay, right? Like we all have these moments of like feeling what could be uncomfortable or just that we're like all there for the same reason to get stronger, feel a little better, sweat, move, right?
yeah, I know for me, I get wildly uncomfortable if I'm in a gym that is not the gym I work in. Like,
Mhm.
I get like maybe uncomfortable, self conscious from
Yeah.
like, I want to look like I know what I'm doing because I'm a fitness professional, but that might say
So
more about
do
me
that,
than the
right?
listener.
So what's the thing you do that first day that you're ever in any new gym or space? The one
What do
thing
I
you know
do?
how to do. Anybody.
Oh, well,
You pick a move you know how to do,
yeah.
right? You go to a thing that you're like, okay, I know what this is. I know how this works. I know how to squat or I know how to do a right or I get on the treadmill, whatever it is. Like do the thing that you know for sure you're going to feel good about. And then you can kind of
Yeah.
move on.
Oh, I think, and again, like this advice just aligns so well with like positive psychology research that we know that you'll be more likely to repeat a health behaviors if you're like have a positive emotional experience
Mhm.
and you're comfortable at some point, like something about it makes you feel good.
Right.
And so I love this advice that like you don't have to go in there whole hog and try to be perfect. You don't have to go in there and get a trainer. Just go in there and like park somewhere that like now that you've
Yeah.
said it, I'm like, oh, I get on a foam roller.
Right.
Like, and I'll get on that foam roller and watch people and,
Yeah.
like, scope things out and make
Yeah.
my plan, but the
Yeah.
first thing I'm doing is, like, getting on the foam roller, I'm low to the ground.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
But
feeling safe.
can
I
I
think
also
that
give a plug though to personal
ugh,
trainers, like generally?
absolutely.
So listen, do I think all personal trainers in the world are absolutely amazing? No, I don't. Okay. Unfortunately, there's still a lot of people that could be better. But I do think that if you are someone that is a beginner, that making the investment into personal training is one of the best things you can do for yourself because then you have someone there who can advocate for you. Then you have someone there who's got your back. Then you have someone there to help teach you. And even if you do 1 session to 5 sessions, so it doesn't matter. You have this it's almost a security blanket to learn and feel comfortable in that space. And then you can move on into your own. And I do think, like you said, kind of getting on the treadmill at first or the foam roller or whatever it is to like scope it out. You might find the person that you're like, that trainer looks like someone I can spend some time with, right? And so again, I know that I am a trainer and but I'm not
No, you're
advocating just for myself. I'm advocating for this idea of learning, feeling comfortable, and having some security.
yeah, and I think just to second that, like if you're a listener and you have goals around gaining strength, understanding your body, learning good movement, feeling, having a sense of autonomy and empowerment in the gym, a personal trainer that's knowledgeable in that environment, that's certified, of course, and that vibes with you is the gateway to all of those things.
Right.
And I second everything that you just said, Marie.
Thank you.
So Marie, the author of Big and Bold: Strength Training for Plus Size Women. I just realized I didn't plug your book, and I should because I love it. I love it. where might our listeners find you out on the magic world of the internet?
Yeah. Instagram is at Morit Summers, so my full name. Like you just said, I do have a book out that's available on Amazon called Big and Bold Strength Training for the Plus Size Woman. And even though it is titled Strength Training for the Plus Size Woman, it's honestly a true beginner's guide to strength training. So it's written from my voice as a plus size woman, but that doesn't mean it's not for everybody. And I just like to make sure people know that. Yeah. And you can find me on like TikTok, but let's go with Instagram.
And come by your gym and we should.
Yes. So my gym is in Brooklyn Heights, call it Form Fitness Brooklyn. We're a personal training studio. One day we will expand to a full size gym.
Dig it. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing with such an open-hearted vulnerability about your experience. And thank you, just as another person in the space who worked for the same employer and had similar experiences, how much I appreciate your strength and your resilience. And I don't know if you know this. Do you remember the one time that we have met in person?
No.
Do you know this?
No, tell me.
Tug of war.
Oh,
and
of course I don't remember.
Our gym used to have a big tug of war tournament, and every gym in the brand would put up 4 men and 4 women, and everyone in my gym would always say that like we're not pulling against the men because all gyms have strong men. You're pulling against the women. And I remember seeing you and being like, "Oh hot damn, I got my work cut out for me."
Okay, wait, who won? Do you remember?
I'm pretty sure my gym won. We won because we won every year, but we also were the biggest team, so it's not fair. Okay. But I do distinctly remember being like, that is a strong female that I'm going to have to work. And I did. And you made me work.
That's really so funny. Of course I don't remember because I go blind. I'm like, tug of war is my sport. Let's go.
Oh yeah. For me, the only things that feel like collegiate rugby again, it has been tug of war and jujitsu, where it's like, I loved rugby so much.
Yeah.
And like the intensity of it, like if I could be on a professional tug of war team, I would. Maybe should we start a professional?
Should we start one? I think we should start one.
I think that we would
decimate.
I'm into it. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, you've heard it here, listener. Marie and I are going to take over the tug of war world. Which is my way of saying we're going to leave it there. Thank you, Marie, for being on Better Than Fine. Listener, if you have questions or thoughts or feedback or ideas or heck pushback, you want to challenge us, step up. We would love to hear from you. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. Just search Darlene Marshall. Instagram, I'm darlene.coach. Shoot me an email. It's info@darlene.coach. And if you are a fan of this show, you better hit subscribe. And if you've already subscribed, you should go and write us a 5-star review because it does help bump us up in the old algorithm, which I'm on about. If you're on YouTube, hit that like, comment, share, do that thing that you do on the internet. And thanks.